Alright. I hope this is working. Should be here, so that's good. Let me just arrange some windows here. They decided to all pop up at the same time. Oh, we've already got some downvotes. That's very exciting. Okay, let's see here. Okay, I see comments are starting to show up. That's lovely. Oof. My hair. Let me see here. Just while we're taking a second to get started, maybe I can go ahead and make sure everything is sharing to the right places, huh? While we're doing that, how is everyone doing? I would just love to hear how everybody's feeling. I don't know, probably somebody who doesn't really care too much for what I'm gonna have to say about TERFs, so let me just go to YouTube here and see if I can follow along on my phone. I know I have a little bit of a delay. Let me just turn my volume way down just to stop this from potentially being an issue. Oh, look, there I can see me. And there is a little bit of a delay. Yeah, so, alright, so I am broadcasting from my new apartment. And could somebody just go ahead and share this to Facebook? Would that be... You know what, let's just hit my share button here, and then I'm just going to share this onto Facebook, and then we can get started. So we'll just go ahead and go to our group. For those of you who don't know, my name's Evie Winters. I'm from the Sounds Like Trans Education group. I'm not going to attempt to say the whole thing because it's ridiculously long. And it's a lie. Yeah, my bed isn't behind me anymore. You're not enjoying the sights of where the magic happens, and all my twinkle lights, but I will be getting more twinkle lights, so don't worry. I'm just gonna post this in here real fast, and then we can get started. And post it. Alright, so let me pull up my notes. I've already said I'm Evie Winters from the Trans Education group. Oh, Danny, that's a nice thing you said about my top. It's actually a dress. Here, let me just show you all real fast. So, alright. So today's topic for the live stream, first of all, it's been a while since I've gotten to do one. I'm very excited. I'm not spinning, Eva. So it's been a hot minute since I've gotten to do a live stream with you all. The last time didn't go so great, so I will not be having alcohol or talking about sensitive subjects to me. Just making good choices. Let's see here, the last time we did one of these, I think the group was maybe 30,000 people. Maybe, it was more like 25,000. We're over 36,000 people now, and that's amazing. I think that's really wonderful. Just the growth is really incredible. And with all those new members are a lot of new faces and a lot of new topics, but a lot of old topics. One of the most kind of controversial, I'm trying to think of the delicate words to use here, front and center problematic topics has been J.K. Rowling, which I hope I'm saying her name correctly. Gosh, it would be a shame if I was rude to her. So can you all hear me okay? Do I sound alright? My microphone is over here, but I don't know if I sound okay. just take a second to do some like audio check-ins. Awesome. Okay, so the group is over 36,000 members now, and that's amazing. I just love all the people in the group. Love them so much. And I love that it's growing. So that's amazing. But speaking of growing, we have a Discord server. I hope the folks in the Discord are watching right now. And the Discord is just reached over 1,000 members itself today. So I'm really, really proud of everybody on the server. Ugh, my hair keeps getting in my eye. It's going to be a long night. I'm going to try my best to keep this to 90 minutes without going incredibly over. I have a tendency to kind of ramble at you all, so I'm hoping to sort of keep it reasonable. My dog decided to come visit. The Discord, I just want to talk for a second about that. The Discord server is sort of a sister group, but also paired with the Facebook group. We can handle topics on our Discord that we can't handle in Facebook because of Facebook's rules. There are a lot of conversations about trans bodies, about the changes we undergo, about our sexualities, that are just not safe to have in Discord for fear of the group being harmed, right? Because Facebook can just decide that all of the learning that 36,000 people have done just didn't matter. They can just make it go away. So it's really important for us to keep Facebook kind of chilled out. But on the Discord server, we can handle harder topics. We can talk about the intimacies of surgery. We can show trans bodies and how we are changing. And we can celebrate that. It's not just education on the Discord server, it's also celebration. A lot of it. In support. And on the mark of support, we added 2 new channels to the server today. And I'm really proud of the response. These channels are actually for cisgender people. And the channels, the entire premise is that a lot of transgender individuals don't have excellent home lives. We can't always get to information that would normally be given to us by our parents. You know, questions that maybe we would ask our mom or our dad. And so those new channels are there for cisgender people to answer mom questions or dad questions for the group and for members of the group. So earlier today, as an example, I was like, boy, this bra is fitting kind of weird, but I don't have somebody to ask about that. That's kind of a question I would normally go to like a sibling or my mom. And since that's not really a person I have in my life, I was able to go to the Discord server and get really amazing feedback. So I hope you all will consider coming to the Discord server. I know on YouTube there's a link in the comments that Missy Prime posted, so that's wonderful. To give you an idea of the format, I do have some questions that I was given preemptively by some members of the group, and I'm going to answer those. The comment section is already pretty interesting. Hey Talia. Let's see here, where was I? Oh yeah, questions from the Facebook group. So I've got those. I will be taking questions from the chat room here. I will be taking questions from the live stream -1 chat channel on our Discord server. So if you're in there and you're watching, you can ask questions there. You could give me feedback there. And I am watching that too. Okay. Oh, interesting. Yeah, we're getting some good questions here. So I'm not going to add this one in yet, but Danny, I do see your question. I want to come back to it. So the format is pretty simple. It's going to be 60 minutes-ish of talking about our primary topic. And then we're going to do another 30 minutes-ish of just answering kind of general questions. Okay? Alright. If nobody has any objections or any questions to start off with, then, or anything that you feel I should say, if anybody thinks they have something I need to say here at the beginning, just let me know in the chat, and then I can get that out of the way so we can just get into it. In the meantime, while you're doing that, I'm going to have a sip of coffee. Give you a second to actually type. Oh, my water bottle's also yelling at me, so... this is the water bottle I got while I was sick with COVID. And it yells at me when it thinks I need to be drinking more water. But I've already had plenty, so... Alright, other little formality. You might notice that I think it's there. There's a link to my coffee account. A lot of people during these live streams like to ask if they can offer some support or do a donation or something like that. If you want to, the link is here and you're welcome to use it. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the Notion, which is where I have... Kirsty, are you not seeing the link? You all can see the link, right? This is my first time trying to use this thing. Because it says it should be visible. Anyway. Okay. So let's just dip right into our primary topics here. Let's just get into it. Someone wrote a question, and I'm going to be reading from my phone. Someone wrote a question, and they basically, and this is from James Gardner, and James says, someone was arguing with me recently that there's no solid, concrete evidence that J.K. Rowling is anti-trans, or it's unfair to label her as such. Which is frankly ridiculous, but whatever. That's literally what it says in the text. This was in response to her deleting Stephen King from Twitter. Words. If I were confronted with that argument, what would I say? There are two views that I think people take on transphobia. A lot of people think transphobia, or any phobia, right? Like homophobia or anti-Semitism or any of that are kind of like an ingrained thing about your personality. And in some cases, they genuinely are. There are people who are transphobes, right? What I would say is, that's hard. Those people tend to announce themselves, but they're getting kind of like smarter about that. So can you just out and out say somebody has a transphobic heart, that you know the contents of their heart? Probably not. But here's what we know. We know that the contents of J.K. Rowling's words are absolutely transphobic. There's no question about it. It doesn't matter what's in her heart. Her results are phobic as hell. She is out and out causing harm to trans people, right? There's no question about the impact of her words. So if you're talking with somebody who like can look at what J.K. Rowling has said and come to the conclusion that J.K. Rowling somehow might not actually hate trans people, it doesn't matter. Her words belie everything else. She has done probably irreparable harm to trans people in the UK, but also in a lot of Western countries in general. A lot of our friends in the UK are really suffering right now. What Rowling attempted to do, what she's attempting to do, is to manipulate legislation and guidance and um, law around identity and how that's determined in the UK in particular, um, but really worldwide, really in any Western country, um, but particularly in the UK where that really hits home for her and she has kind of a knowledge of local policy. So, one second. That's only like my third cup of coffee today, so I'm like really proud of myself. I'm watching the chat right now and it's delightful. It's a lot of activity. People have very strong opinions about her. Transphobia in general, TERFism in general, is really insidious, right? It pretends to be concerned with folks' health. It tries to reach out for, oh, I'm trying to make a positive change, but there are these people who are trying to do something that's gonna hurt you, right? And those people are, well, me. Rowling's words harm every trans person. She's deliberately targeting trans women with her words. She is deliberately using language in such a way that trans men and non-binary folks are not counted as part of the conversation for her. And the reason there is because if you add trans men to that equation, if you say, well, there are trans people who were assigned female at birth, it gets a lot more complicated to say, well, transness is all about sneaking into bathrooms, right? I think Talia's having a problem in the chat. Sorry. So the thing I want to get to here is, like, I want to talk about TERFism, but I also want to talk about Rowling in particular. Rowling has caused irreparable harm, probably harm that is going to take decades to even sort of smooth over. And I think it's going to firmly ingrain itself in politics for a while in the UK, but also in the United States. I did get a question about how transphobia differs in the UK and in the United States, and the impact of that, and I am interested in that, but I can only speak to one half of the equation, so. With Rowling, a lot of people have said, like, that they're willing to acknowledge the things that Rowling has said are problematic, deeply problematic, right? But a lot of people aren't willing to really do anything about that. They'll say, well, I'm angry at her, right? Rowling sucks. One of the most common sort of responses to Rowling's nonsense has been death of the author. And that's a process wherein people say, well, gosh, it's a real shame that somebody else wrote Harry Potter, or that the Rowling is no longer alive. Like, what author, right? There's never been any indication that that works. Rowling is still profiting from the Harry Potter franchise. She will continue to. And she's going to continue to as long as people, and this is the part that makes a lot of folks uncomfortable, she's going to keep profiting from it as long as people are marketing the product. The product is Harry Potter. It doesn't matter if you're doing that through fan fiction or through t-shirts or pins or scarves or whatever. You are marketing her franchise. She profits from it. The more popular it is, the more money she makes. So my frustration with a lot of cisgender folk is that they're feigning support. And a lot of cisgender people will come out of the woodwork to be like, I'm still going to support her. I'm still going to be a Harry Potter fan, right? Um, but also J.K. Rowling sucks, right? Which is really a person saying, like, I'm not happy about it, but I am going to keep marketing J.K. Rowling's products. And that's not good. And if you are tempted to tell a trans person in your life that you really just genuinely cannot give up Harry Potter, don't. It's offensive at this point. Our relationship as trans people with Harry Potter is such that we can't interface with it anymore without at least the background awareness that the creator of this work hates us. And she does. You know, we're going to come back to that question really quickly of like, can you tell if she's phobic? Trust trans people. We don't need to prove someone hates us. We know. We get a really good feel for that, right? We get a good taste for it. The things she said, and we could go through them forever because she hasn't stopped. I've actually been working on a piece about Rowling for a while now. The things that Rowling has said really seem fine to a lot of people unless you stop to think about them. She's a proponent of, and some of this is just general TERF philosophy, but she is perpetuating myths like the bathroom myth. And the bathroom myth in particular is targeted at trans women. The idea there, the thought process is that I am trying to sneak into women's restrooms so that I can cause some harm there. Right? First of all, any person that wants to sneak into a women's restroom is going to do that. It's not like there's armed guards at the door. And second of all, how could you tell? Most people can't identify me as a trans person right off the bat. I sort of, I mean, I don't think of myself as a particularly attractive woman, but nobody has he/him'd me without knowing that I was trans for quite some time. So that tells me, like, objectively that I'm passing. I've never been stopped on my way into a restroom. I've never really had anybody in a restroom. I've only ever had bad interactions in men's rooms, actually. When people perpetuate this myth that as a trans woman I'm out to cause some harm, I'm out to invade women's spaces, that comes in two flavors. One is I am lying in some way. And what they mean is that I have gone through all of this. I have modified my body. I have had hormones. I've done all of this. I have literally crippled my ability to have like a male sexuality, which I don't miss one bit. The running theory in that case is that I did all of those things. I did all this work. I convinced people I was trans so that I could sneak into these spaces. I think people who think that are not particularly aware of how much I gave up to acknowledge my womanhood. There's a certain talk about male privilege, right? Male privilege definitely exists, and I definitely gave that up. And I don't miss it. But the idea that any man who is like a vicious person is going to give up all of that power to try to gain power over one specific instance is really odd to me, and really doesn't hold up, right? Vicious men who are out to cause harm, aren't particularly concerned about the sign on a door. They are not concerned with like, oh, does the store say women only? Gosh, well, I guess I better not go in there and cause trouble. that's not how predators think, right? And they've never thought that way. Men have never needed an excuse to do harm. They've never had to be clever about that. They just do it. And the idea that they would need to pretend in order to cause that harm is just almost laughable on its face. But I think that whole theory does take root because people are so afraid of anyone with a male body, right? And I am going to say male body in quotes, because we can get into that bit about bioessentialism later. Oh, Takira, I see her in the chat. It's so lovely to see you. So, I'm going to take a pause here. And if anybody has got a question, re the things Rowling has said, I'm happy to take it real quick. And I'm just going to have some sips of my coffee while I give you a chance to say some things. For anybody that's curious, it's 6:30 and this is not decaf. Takira, if you are in the Discord, we're taking questions in, and I want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. The channel name is live-stream-1-chat. It's in the public access section. You can find that towards the top of the channel list. Hope that was helpful. That's going to be pretty real time. I see that Charlie is active in helping moderate the chat over in the Discord, so that's wonderful. Since I don't see any questions here, I'm going to go to the next thing, which is the next idea of like why trans women should not be allowed in women's spaces, right? These are things that Rowling is trying to say. The next theory is that, yes, I'm a woman, or I'm a trans woman, no space, is what they would say, I am a woman. There is a thing out there where they say, well, they cannot reliably tell me apart from a cisgender man. And because they can't tell me apart from a cisgender man, I need to, I should be set aside. I should be segregated in that way, right? To protect cisgender women from men who they acknowledge are the problem. They acknowledge that I'm not the problem in that case. They say we need to be protected from men, and since we can't tell you apart from men, we're going to keep you out. That should be scary to every woman, cisgender or no. That should terrify you. And it is terrifying. And the reason it's terrifying is because what that means is there's going to be a site check, right? And not to jump topics, the United States just issued guidance to shelters. The United States just issued guidance to shelters on how to spot trans women. A lot of that would not work for me. I would not be spotted trying to go into a shelter or anything like that. My documentation all says the correct things about me. My voice, I don't think, gives me away. My features, I mean, I could be anybody with facial deformities. You know? People can't tell. So, when people say we can't tell, what they mean is they can't on-site identify a cisgender woman versus a trans woman reliably versus a cisgender man. And that happens to a lot of cis women. Cis women get harassed more in bathrooms about appearing to look more like men than I do. Like, there are cis women that I know in my life who have had more bad experiences in women's restrooms than I have. So when somebody starts instituting a site check, of like, oh, how do you look, right? How do you look to me? Do you look like a woman? What they're saying is that there's a way to look like a woman. And that way to like look like a woman often doesn't include our black sisters. It doesn't include androgynous women. It doesn't include women who maybe dress in a non-conforming way. It doesn't include women who cut their hair short. It doesn't include women with strong jawlines. It doesn't include women with large noses, right? That's dangerous to implement a sight check right off the bat. So this concept that anybody can sort of tell who's trans or not trans, it's not that easy. And you definitely shouldn't be writing it into law because that's dangerous, right? So, oh my gosh, my hair keeps tickling my lip. Anyway, curly hair. So that's kind of that second theory, right? It's like, oh, I can't tell trans women apart from men. Like I can't tell trans women apart from men, and therefore they can't come into women's spaces. That's not my problem as a trans woman, that you can't tell. You don't need to be able to tell. Point blank. So, yeah, Talia, I can see the chat. So, do you want me to read that out, Talia? Would that be helpful to you? Just let me know. Another thing that Rowling admitted to, or rather tried to use as sort of a rhetorical point, is that she was sexually assaulted. And sexual assault, I'm not gonna lie, affects cisgender women more than it does men. However, to be assigned male at birth, it didn't protect me. I have also been sexually assaulted quite a few times throughout my life. And, you know, I tried to say I was going to avoid hard topics, and here we are. I find it patently offensive when people attempt to weaponize their trauma to harm others. Because I have seen so much. And it is, if I go into a restaurant and someone is wearing something that I find triggering, I leave the restaurant. I don't demand other people not be in spaces I'm going to be in, right? If TERFs, or if people who are really concerned for their safety would like to have that level of safety, more single stall restaurants, or not restaurants, more single stall restrooms need to be created with good locks and all of that, so there's no surprises, so nobody can be in there with me, right? So that I am safe. It's not important to segregate me out. It's important to make sure that everybody has a space they can go to where they feel safe. And that those spaces are optional. So I'm going to take a drink of coffee, and then I'm going to read what Talia's got here. Talia, I would be interested if you could like give me some more there to read directly about like Rowling's definition of womanhood, so that I could just read that out. So yeah, as a survivor, I'm pretty offended about the things that Rowling had to say regarding sexual assault, and that was just in her first letter. The next thing she did was the whole trans kids thing. I'm just gonna nip this one in the bud. transgender children are not given hormones. Up until 11, 12, 13, transgender children are not given anything. They are given new names, haircuts, different clothing styles. They are allowed to assume the role in society that best matches their gender. That's it. At around 11 or 12, we start talking about puberty blockers. Puberty blockers are medicine. They are already given to children to stop precocious puberty. They are reversible, largely. They are medicine. Every medicine has side effects. Every medicine is not without harm. That's not for society to get to determine who gets the medicine. That's between a doctor, and that's between a parent, in that case, or a guardian, and the child, right? Those are the three people who should be involved in medical decisions for a child. In the United States, one of our big topics, since 2008 is how involved should the government be in medicine. And what I found really fascinating is a lot of people were screaming like the government should not be involved in medicine at all. But then they turn right around and they say, well, except for this, because we don't like these people, And that's, first of all, the right is not notorious for their moral or logical consistency, but that's pretty brazen, right? I'm reading what Talia's got in the Discord here. So, the bit about trans children, puberty blockers are given to trans children. Hormones are given to trans children as they get older and can make more decisions for themselves, and as it's socially necessary for them to start puberty. Delayed puberty isn't the end of the world. And that's always done with the guidance of doctors, therapists, psychiatrists, and everything. That's a team of people making a decision like, okay, this person is ready to start puberty in this way. That's already a very high threshold. And a lot of the concern here is about irreparable harm, right? Like, these medicines can cause irreparable harm to children. Puberty will too. Like, puberty absolutely causes irreparable harm for transgender children when their bodies start to change in ways that don't at all correspond with the way society has been trained to see their gender, right? I think every elder trans woman who had to transition after puberty is perfectly aware of that, right? Every single one of us wishes we could have transitioned younger. So, I want to say, and I'm going to move off the Rowling topic because we're already 30 minutes in and I don't want to burn an hour on just Rowling herself. In the Discord chat, Talia is doing a really great job breaking down some of the philosophical problems about the things that Rowling had to say, one of which is that women have periods. And that concept of women have periods belong to women, those two things are married, and are necessary for womanhood, right? Part of her critique of me is that I will never know that. I will never have a period. And we are not going to broach the subject of periods for trans women on this live stream because I could go on about that for a hot minute. Her kind of concept about that is if you can't have a period, if you don't have periods, then you're not a woman. So in doing so, she's eliminated herself from womanhood, right? She no longer has that. She's not a person who menstruates anymore, just almost certainly by age and everything else. So, she's really weaponizing something in that case that again cuts across boundaries. There are very few good boundaries that you could draw. In fact, I can't think of any that you could draw that say this is womanhood, that will not exclude some cisgender women, or do not exclude or do not preclude you doing some kind of human rights abuse to get that information. So, Rowling is definitely transphobic. There's no question about that. It is not safe or good to interface with Harry Potter anymore. The truth is, every trans person sees that now, and at the very least, we know the person who made it hates us, right? So does everybody else. Rowling is not a quiet person. When I see you in your house gear, when I see you posting your TikToks or your funny memes about your house, this leaves me with the question of, like, do you agree with Rowling? So at the very, very baseline, every time you're going to say something like, oh, I love Harry Potter, you need to also include, I hate Rowling. But even that, you're still marketing her products. For every 1,000 people that see your messages on Facebook, like you're in your groups, you're writing your fan fiction, for every few hundred, for every 1,000 people that see that, a certain number of them will go to Universal Studios, they will go to the Harry Potter sections, they will buy tickets, they will buy merchandise. That's just how marketing works. You can't interface with that brand without promoting her products. And, like, that sucks. But I swear, the amount of people who go out of their way to blame trans people for pointing that out is way too high. Like, way too high. Trans people are not taking anything from you by pointing that out. If you want to point out the aggressor here, look at Rowling. Maybe if Rowling shuts up, everybody can sort of go back to enjoying Harry Potter without having to, like, ridiculously, like, have this conversation about it, you know? Okay, we're going to move on from Rowling, because we are getting some good questions in the Discord, and I saw one here that I really liked. And I do want to talk about TERFism. So, let's see here. Danny says, would love to hear how TERFs not being as prominent... Actually, here, I can just add it to the broadcast. Here it is. I love this. So if you comment in YouTube, I can just add it. Would love to hear how TERFs not being as prominent in the U.S. benefits trans people. The different prejudices, pattern of prejudice. That is the question I was thinking of, but I didn't know how to say that. TERFs might not be as prominent in the U.S. Writ large, but that doesn't mean the thought processes aren't. TERF philosophy in the UK does come here. We have congressmen quoting J.K. Rowling on the House floor, right? Bathroom bills and all of it, like, TERF rhetoric comes here and is usually absorbed by higher class culture, which in this case is the government in a lot of cases. So TERF rhetoric is usually very popular in right-wing spaces, as it is in the UK. But it's got a different foothold here, not less of one, just a different foothold. And I think that's probably because of the aggressive masculinity of um, of the United States culture. And what I mean by that is, TERF rhetoric is primarily concerned with protecting women, women's rights, right? Although they will say like sex-based rights now. That's a new one. Um, in order for that logic to take hold, in order for that to be considered important, a culture must first value women. And the United States is not notorious for valuing women. So, a lot of those arguments don't take root as much here, and you really only hear them from women. In general, it's very rare for me to get trans exclusionary radical feminist rhetoric from a man, um, right? Because our society does not value women enough to put them front and center as a reason to exclude trans women. Instead, our culture focuses on trans women as like an abomination of manhood, right? Weakness, some kind of deviancy. The United States is a very puritanical culture, even though we're like very, there's a lot of debauchery in the United States. Our thinking is still based in Puritanism. And so there's a lot of like, that's unnatural, that sort of thing that we get. So TERF rhetoric does take hold here differently. It's usually used as sort of a last ditch, and usually specifically against trans women. That said, though, all TERF rhetoric, almost as a core part of its being, right, aims to eliminate trans men from the conversation by just treating them as confused women, which is entirely wrong. And then the other thing that happens here in the United States, and I don't know if this is the same in the UK, is a lot of TERF rhetoric is used to espouse a certain sort of is used to promote toxic masculinity. In a way, is used to promote patriarchal attitudes. And what I mean by that is masculine structures will take up that sort of like, oh, we have to protect women, because they can use that rhetoric to enforce a certain idea of womanhood. And so, like, the United States culture is like, oh yeah, feminism, right? And then it gives like a very strong idea of what that core womanhood needs to look like, a very sort of conservative idea. And then if you deviate from that, you are in some way suspect. So I hope that's useful information there concerning like just like the differences. Again, like I'm not in the UK. I've been in the UK one time in my life. But like the United States is all about hard lines that everybody ignores until they need to be angry. That's just our logic. Like, we don't believe in anything until we believe in it very firmly. So I want to go and take a question from the Discord real quick. And I think Takira raised a really interesting question, which I can't put in the chat here, which is, how do we make space to have conversations with cisgender women who are wary of trans folks without reducing them to a stereotype / simply labeling them as TERFs and sometimes failing to see them as whole people? Which is like, good question. When I'm talking with anybody, TERF or no, I tend to focus on their behavior rather than who they are. I'm a Buddhist. I believe very much that I can change, and so can anybody else. there are very few things about any identity that are fixed and immutable. That's a core belief of my religion, and I don't surrender that because it's convenient. So when I'm talking with somebody, and I'm not going to name this person, I was conversing with a person who held a lot of like trans exclusionary radical feminist views. And it was amazing how much progress we made one-on-one when a person is like when they were willing to learn, right? And it was really, they were at first very frustrating for me to talk to. Well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, what about this? And eventually they got to a certain point where they realized all of their whatabouts were caging them in too, right? And I think when they had that realization, they started to move away from that and soften. And now I actually talk to that person on a regular basis. I'm not going to say they're a, amazing ally. But they are coming along. There was a person who came in the trans EDU group who said, like, I have TERF beliefs, and admitted that out front. This person was from Australia, and the group did a really excellent job educating this person. They were very resistant, and they did that same thing. They kept coming about, what about this? What about this? What about this? Right? And they ended up getting very frustrated because people weren't hearing them. People were only hearing the rhetoric and assigning them a personality because of it, right? I ended up chatting privately with that person as well. And we've had very good talks. We talk once a week now. That's actually a person I coach privately on trans issues. And I think for a lot of TERF beliefs, it just comes down to conceptualizing a framework of womanhood. A lot of cisgender women have never had to question womanhood. They've never had to think about it. They've never had to wonder if that was them. They've never had to question womanhood because it was given to them. And it was given to them along with a lot of other things on the basis of their bodies, right? A lot of abuse comes to people who are born with vulvas, vagina, all of that, right? Like a lot of people who are assigned female at birth they receive abuse for that, regardless of their gender presentation, right? They are put on rails that assign them a certain place in society. And a lot of TERFs really believe that that place, that assignment, is womanhood, and that womanhood is inextricably linked to their genitalia, right? To their primary sex characteristics. That's an understandable view to arrive at. And that's a frustrating view, right? If you're a trans person and you're trying to talk to somebody whose basis of gender is genitalia and what happens next, that's hard. That's a harder conversation because it's rooted in something that is fixed about them, right? The problem here is that, first of all, feminism has been going out of its way to try to eliminate that as, like, that's womanhood. To not have womanhood defined entirely as suffering, or as trauma, right? Or as a biological thing, right? I'm not going to get too in the weeds here. I think reading Judith Butler is probably good. There are some really great treatises out there about the philosophy of womanhood and who gets to claim to be a woman. And the truth is, it's kind of fuzzy, and there's not really a good definition of any of it. There's not a good definition of manhood, right? Manhood in one culture is different than manhood in a different culture. they have things linking them, but they're not exactly the same. And if they're not exactly the same, then it means that that can change. And that's an uncomfortable realization for a lot of people. Talia says that there's a fixed definition of womanhood here, so I'm going to scroll down. Yeah. Talia, I was actually about to get to that. The truth is that womanhood is for people who say they are women, because there's really no other metric you can use to be sure, right? And more importantly, there is something very uncomfortable and scary about the idea that somebody else gets to determine who you are, right? That should terrify you. That based on your body, someone can tell you your identity or certain things about you. That's the basis of bioessentialism, which I do want to get to. That's the basis of phrenology. That's the basis of a lot of human rights abuses that wound up with people in concentration camps, right? To be a woman is to be part of womanhood. And what does that mean, right? What does it even mean to be a part of womanhood? That's hard. My theory about womanhood, my personal belief about it, is that womanhood is sort of this collective moving definition and pattern that women together are doing, right? It's bigger than any one woman. Like, no one woman can change the whole of womanhood, but it does shift and change over time. There are smaller pockets of like different kinds of womanhood. Like when you zoom in on it, when you get closer to it, it's not all just one womanhood. It's like a whole bunch of similar experiences that are collected. I was using the example of a color palette, like the one on your computer. You know, you get like a square, and it's got a grid of color on it, right? And if you're sitting way far back, you can sort of look at that and you can go, oh, that's blue. Oh, that's pink. There's red. I see them, right? But when you start to zoom in, suddenly there are a lot of different shades of red. There are a lot of different shades of pink. There are a lot of different shades of blue. And when you start to get at the edges, it starts to not be blue anymore, but it's still within that parameter of what you thought was blue. Everything is kind of like that. It sort of falls apart the closer you get to it, right? Womanhood is a collective narrative that we are all telling, every woman, and we all influence it and we're all a part of it. It's like an ecosystem. It's like language, right? So, I saw another question in the chat here that I think feeds into this, which is like, do trans women, me, in my dress and my makeup, with my choker, do I perpetuate stereotypes about womanhood? Yeah. And so does every cisgender woman I know. Like, I have a lot of what you would call stereotypical things that I enjoy as part of my womanhood, right? I wear dresses. I love makeup. I love doing my makeup. I have long hair, longish hair. I like jewelry, right? I enjoy telling my friends I love them, and I enjoy giving people hugs. I gesticulate, when I'm speaking in ways that are typically considered to be feminine. I didn't get any of those things from just like inside of me, right? I learned them from other women and other women who were doing them, right? So, um, I'll give you an example. When I was, in middle school, there were different cliques, right? Um, my favorite one were Valley Girls. And the thing that when I was in maybe middle school, late elementary school, it was very popular to mock Valley Girls, right? And there was one thing, one specific little like vocal habit that they had, that kind of like everybody sort of made fun of collectively, which was like, saying like in that way. Um, and we all made fun of it so much that we all started saying it. And that's sort of how womanhood progresses, right? Like, there was. um, we start with sort of a general same space, right? Our parents give us kind of the same womanhood, girlhood. We have a lot of very similar experiences. Our parents dress us, so of course our womanhood early on reflects our parents' beliefs about it, and also what clothing is able for them to buy. Um, so if I want to participate in the narrative of womanhood, of course I'm going to do the things that help other people understand that I'm a woman, and what those things are is determined by women. Um, the example that I'll kind of like super reach for here is like dresses, right? Not all women wear dresses, but it is kind of understood to be a thing that women do, even if men are allowed to wear them, right? So by wearing a dress, I signal my femininity a little bit. But I'm far and away not the only woman I know that wears a dress, right? My girlfriend, one of my girlfriends, wears dresses all the time. My partners all wear makeup. Um, Womanhood is that sort of collective. It's a bunch of like memes and stories and ideas all put together that women are doing. We're creating that thing ourselves. Like, um, it's so incredibly varied. There's no one collective definition. Stereotypes do exist, but like, I'm not perpetuating them. I'm using what actually works and what makes me feel good. The things I do for my womanhood are all things that, like, okay, I was raised in West Virginia, right? I could have been very much a woman who um, wore camouflage and enjoyed, um, like, who wore camouflage and enjoyed hunting and all of it. Um, my sisters are not like me. I tried on different things that I was learning from other women, that I kind of saw women doing, and I said, okay, let me try that. And then a lot of it I enjoyed. One of those things, makeup, um, jewelry, dresses, stuffed animals. I have quite the collection of stuffed animals. I enjoy them, right? That's my womanhood, and I'm not saying that's anybody else's, you know? And that's just the outward, like, stylistic stuff, right? There's a lot of things about womanhood that are more like in behavioral or about how we relate to one another, um, how we communicate. So, you know, I have a partner who's very, 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 very wonderful and who's an amazing partner to me, who is agender. Nothing they do is perpetuating stereotypes about agender people, right? Like, um, they're not perpetuating um, stereotypes about womanhood just because they dress a certain way, right? Um, I have two cisgender women as my partners. Um, they have very different womanhoods, right? One of my partners is very like, oh, I love rocks and astrology and is a vegetarian and, dresses in flowing clothes and a little more like boho style. And then I have another partner who's kind of like flighty and bright and colorful and almost like a pixie, right? Um, they have different womanhoods. There's some similarities. They're not perpetuating stereotypes about them. And nothing that they do is off limits to other genders. It's just kind of commonly understood that certain genders will do these things. Right? So yeah, I'm having a tough time following you in the chat and also talking, honey. So I'm not ignoring you, I promise. So yeah, who gets to decide who participates in the narrative, right? I do. I get to decide if that's my narrative, if that's the group of people I feel most comfortable around, if that's the aura of my life. Everyone gets to make that decision. For a lot of people, they're handed a default, and that default is good enough. A lot of, I've talked to an awful lot of cisgender men who are afraid to not be cisgender men. And I say cisgender men, I should say this in quotes, because I think a lot of them maybe aren't. And the thing I hear from them is very much like, well, I don't feel like a man. I don't relate to men well, but I'm not a woman. And they have like an intuitive understanding of that. They're not questioning philosophically like where they belong. They're just saying like they intuit it. They intuit it that they're not this group of people, but they feel comfortable enough in manhood that they don't really feel the need to make any changes or put themselves at any risk to say so, right? There are a lot more people who claim to be cisgender men and aren't, who are probably some variety of non-binary, then we will probably know for a very long time, because there's so much wrapped up in masculinity and how it enforces itself. So, okay, hold on, I'm gonna click my chat over here, hold on. Alright, I'm gonna click out. So there are a lot of like, the gender binary is not as strong as people think it is. There's a lot of blurring at the edges. It's like that color palette, right? It gets weird if you're on the edge. You're like, well, I'm sort of blue, but I'm not really blue. I'm more of a teal, right? People should have the right to say where they stand in that color wheel without having to be one of two colors. And that's how human reality works, right? None of us have ever fit the box. We create the boxes to communicate our experience, not to need to fit them, right? I don't create a box so I can go climb in it. I use a label for my gender, my sexuality, all of that to help other people sort of understand me, and to understand where I'm coming from, and I give that to them as a sort of like mental shortcut about me. Right, so for me to say like I'm a woman does communicate some information about me. It communicates sort of who I'm feeling close to in that way. To say that I'm a pansexual sapphic communicates some information about me. It says like, okay, I'm sort of broadly attracted to everyone, but I tend to like have this sort of general pull towards a certain group of people, right? Labels are important because they help us communicate our experience, but labels will only ever get us sort of close enough. So like, the example, I am going to use an example of sapphics here, sapphic/lesbian. A lot of non-binary people who are not women, by definition, are also lesbians, are also sapphics, right? And that's fine, right? The word sapphic is meant to communicate a certain feeling, a certain understanding, a certain community about you, right? It sort of says, like, okay, here's who I'm attracted to and here's where I'm starting, right? When I say pansexual, some people get a certain idea of that, right? These labels are meant to get us close enough, because, like, even when I used to say I'm pansexual, that never got me close enough to what I wanted to communicate, and that's why it wasn't a good label in the end. I used to have to explain that pansexuality for me meant that I was attracted to all women, almost all non-binary people, 5 famous men, and the one guy who's nice to me in the park. Who I hope isn't watching this. I think I may have just made a mistake. So, like, that explanation was necessary because pansexual didn't get me close enough. So now I say pansexual sapphic, and that honestly does get me close enough. Most people sort of get it when I say those words. That's all that matters. And those aren't the only words. Like, we have sort of like bottom and top. We have words to communicate our sexual energy. We have, when I say I'm a Virgo, right? People have thoughts of that. Takira, a lot of your questions are about building narratives with people who strongly disagree with us. I've had really good luck with that, but I think it has to start with personhood. It's been the case that TERFs, or trans exclusionary radical feminists, or people who are bigoted, are more willing to listen to me once they see me as a human and not just as, like, somebody who's diametrically opposed to them. You know, they get their identity wrapped up in a certain sense of gender, and I am a threat to that. So until they see me as a human, they won't listen to me. Conversations have to be had with an equal understanding. And that doesn't mean we have to agree to have a conversation, but it does mean that if we're going to try and influence somebody else, they have to at least see me as human and worth hearing, right? The TERFs I talked to, I made so much more headway with them once they saw me as a human and not a threat, right? Once they could see I'm not out to get them, once they could trust me as a person, then we could make some progress. That's an intense process. And I've never really had progress with that in large areas. And I don't think anybody has. In public spaces, the best thing we can do is not make it safe for those philosophies to exist there. In private, I've had some success, and that has all been predicated on finding the common humanity and working out from there. So, can you work with TERFs? I believe yes. I believe you can. I firmly believe that. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be a very good Buddhist. But it is a question of, there are variables involved there. One of those things is time. Time matters very much. How much time can you invest in this? Knowledge is going to matter. Communication skills are going to matter. You may not have the time, energy, skills, or understanding to reach this person. That doesn't mean nobody can be reached. Everybody can be reached. But, you know, like, you can only do so much. You can't cause people to change. You can only invite them to change. You can offer them a delicious new idea, and make it palatable to them, you can advertise that to them. But if they're not willing to have that, if they're not willing to like mentally munch down on it, then it's not going to work. Okay? So, like, I hope that kind of broadly answers a lot of your questions, because they all seem to be very focused on sort of like having these conversations. And I don't think there's a reliable way to do that. It's very personal. It almost has to be. Yeah, Kayla, you're entirely right. Like, private discourse versus public discourse are entirely different. And even just being able to see somebody, like, I get a very different reaction from people when they can literally see me, because they know I'm not angry. Sometimes their words hurt. And I want them to see that those words hurt. So when I'm working with people privately, I'll do like audio-visual chats so that they can see me. Let's see here. I've got a couple other questions that are in the Notion here. So let me just pop in. One of these I think is, we're kind of in that like more general section, so I don't want to talk about just TERFs. Sorry about that. So, one of my favorite questions that I got before this was, and I didn't write down a name, so I'm very sorry to whoever asked me this question. I've noticed that several conservatives I know are coming around to the conceptual idea of trans people. Most of them seem to subscribe to the notion that being transgender is a matter of personal freedom that doesn't affect others. So they take the live and let live approach. Do I think that's a good stepping stone towards societal trans acceptance? This is a very libertarian view. And libertarian politics is always exceptionally frustrating for me because it prides itself on not taking stances on basically anything. Sorry. In my workplace is like this. My workplace takes a live and let live stance with me. They're not going to advertise that they are trans friendly, but also they've been wonderfully accepting with me. So this gives me kind of like mixed feelings, right? Libertarian philosophies on trans people that like, oh, this is a matter of personal freedom, can end up being supportive. Most often they give space to people. The requisite for a libertarian believing that is that they also need to believe that the people who hate me are expressing that same freedom, right? Their neutrality benefits the most hostile people because the most hostile people have power. So is it a stepping stone towards acceptance? I don't really think so. I think it's a stepping stone towards abuses that are different. It sidesteps the question entirely. It washes society of responsibility for being ethical. So, like, a person who says, well, I don't care about that, right? They have privilege. They've washed their hands of it. They've said, I can walk away from this. As a trans person, I don't have that ability to walk away from issues that affect me. I don't get the luxury of neutrality. And neutrality is a luxury. So, at best, that sort of like neutral politic is, it's not out and out harmful, but it doesn't do anything to make me safer. It's a way to make people who are low-key phobic feel better about that. It's also kind of invalidating, right? To make, like, gender is not a matter of like it's not an issue of like, oh, this is my personal freedom. It is a right to my identity, right? So when they say like, oh, that's a personal choice, right? My gender is not a choice that I made. Um, if I were given the choice, I would probably have a different gender because that would have been easier for me. It was hard growing up where I was. It was hard transitioning. I've had my car window shattered on the basis of who I am, right? That's not a choice that I made to endure that. That's not like happy and fun for me, right? Um, the choices I made were often to try very hard not to be trans, right? So when they say like, oh, that's a personal choice, but I respect that, and even I'll use your pronouns. Um, mm, um, they're writing it off. They're performing a certain sort of like meh acceptance. Um, where really the thing they're saying is I don't care. I don't want to talk about it. Um, and that's not acceptance, and that's not helpful, and that's not good. It doesn't help us get to acceptance. It doesn't make spaces safer for me. Um, it's strictly just a person absolving themselves of any responsibility to participate or to have an ethical stance of any kind. So that's what I'm going to say on the whole like laissez-faire support thing is, um, you know, if you're not standing for something, then to give a little bit of a Hamilton quote, then you're falling for something. So, let's see here. I think I saw another question in the chat here that I thought was interesting, but the chat is moving very quickly this time. So the question we got, and I'm gonna throw it up here, if I can get back to it, oops, is from Danny, and it just says, like, how do we as a trans person show sympathy to individual detransitioners online or in person? You show them sympathy, right? They went through some stuff, they learned some stuff, right? We don't need to burn the world down to benefit detransitioners. Or we don't need to assume that their stories are anything but personal, right? A certain amount of people, rule of large numbers, a certain amount of people are going to believe certain things about themselves and turn out to be wrong, right? That's true of every kind of identity. So, like, a lot of people are like, oh, I grew up thinking I was straight. That was a lie. A lot of, like, people think that the defaults are okay, even if they're equally harmful. We can express sympathy for detransitioners without we can express sympathy for detransitioners in a very like I'm sorry that that was your experience kind of way, without making that experience part of the trans narrative. By kind of nature, they're not trans. And if they are trans and they detransitioned, then we need to be asking why. Why would somebody who's trans detransition? And a lot of times that's fear and abuse, in which case the sympathy needs to be different. Because that's a person who was driven out of their identity, was driven back into the closet in a way. And that sucks. So those people deserve sympathy, and care, because they need it. A lot of people worry about like trans kids being detransitioners. Some of them will be. Some of them will be. Oh, hold on. Another fire truck. I'm not sure how loud that is for y'all. Um, so, where was I at before the fire truck? ADHD is fun. Um, oh yeah, trans kids. There is a concern, right, that trans kids are going to get older and detransition, and then they will be, um, in the wrong body for their gender, right? I'm not going to say that's not a risk, but that's a call for more information, not a call for roadblocks. That's a call for better education, not a call for government to get involved in healthcare in that way. Um, it will happen. Rule of large numbers, it's going to happen. But you know what's already happening? Trans kids killing themselves. That's happening. That's real. That's today. That's not a theory. That's a thing that's happening. And they're being buried with names that made them sick. So, like, I'm not here for the concern trolling that ignores that, right? A lot of people don't want us to look at the current reality. They don't want to look at the problems that exist currently. They want us to look at theoretical things that may go wrong because we can't really prove that that's not true, right? So I hope that that kind of answers our sort of feelings about detransitioners, or like my feelings about detransitioners. Um, I love and respect them. They're people who made, they opted to try something for themselves. It didn't work for them, or it wasn't right for them, or they learned something new in the process. That's being human. Nothing wrong with that. Okay. I'm just going to look here and see if there are any other questions. I thought I saw a question. But boy, does this chat move quickly. Oh, okay, so we've got this question here. How do you avoid being trapped in circular logic? It seems like sometimes I feel like I'm making headway, they fall back into their default mode of thinking. So we're talking about TERFs again, or people with bigoted attitudes. You need to know where you are. You need to know who you are, right? I don't fall for that logic because I have a strength of my identity. I know who I am. I'm Evie Winters. I'm a Buddhist. I'm a woman. I am transgender. I am the oldest of 6 children. I love my siblings. I think that if you're planted firmly in your identity, if you have some strength in that, you're not going to get sucked up in the circular logic. And oftentimes when it comes to circular logic in other people, again, you can't take that from someone. There's no way. There's no way for me to reach in someone's brain and take out their frustrating ideas. They have to give them up. A lot of our problems in educating are that we want so badly for someone to believe a certain thing that we're handing them. And we get frustrated when they won't take it. But they have to be ready, you know? So what I would say is keep trying. Don't give ground just because somebody gets frustrated and gives up, right? You might not be able to convince that person. A lot of people become convinced by needing to be convinced. I did a poll in the group, just sort of an informal thing, where I asked, what was it that convinced the liberal people, the people who thought they were on the right side of things, that they had more to learn? And the biggest number one response was that they met somebody, they met a trans person in person. They had a reason to care, and they realized in that moment that they didn't know enough. People learn when they have a reason to learn. I learn a language because I live in the country, or because I have, because I'm immersed, and because I'm not allowed to use English there, or because my partner speaks it, right? You learn when you have a reason to learn, when you have a motivation to learn. I learn tools in my trade, and then I use them. And anything I don't have a reason to use, I end up forgetting, right? So, like, it's easy to get frustrated when people don't believe as we do. They're getting frustrated too. It's hard to walk away from that. It's hard to say, like, oh, okay, well, we're going to take a little break from this. But sometimes they need pressure, pause, pressure, pause, pressure, pause. And then, a hand out to say, like, hey, it's okay, you're safe. Repeated interactions with the same person are often very helpful, because they teach them that you're safe, right? People need to be safe to give up their fear, and transphobia is a fear. It's a fear that I'm in some way harmful, or a fear that I'm out to get people, or a fear that if they accept me, that something core is lost, right? So, yeah, like, familiarity is the antithesis of fear. We can teach people that we're not out to hurt them. And when people see that they're wrong, then they can understand that they're wrong. But usually that'll involve them seeing the truth first. They'll see, like, oh, this person's not so bad. Trans people aren't so bad. Trans people are not what I learned on Fox News, right? So, I hope that helps. Let's see here. We're reaching our 90-minute mark. We actually just made it to the 90-minute mark. I'm gonna take a few more questions, like one or two more, and then we're gonna call it a night, okay? So, does anybody have a question? It can be general, it can be personal, you can ask me something. Whatever you like. But this is kind of like open AMA time for a few more minutes. And take a drink of water while you wait, while you think of something. And if nobody's got anything, that's totally fine. It's hard for me to show you all Misha right now because of the way my camera is. Talia, I love you. That's very kind of you to say. So Missy, it is hard for me to show you Misha. I'm gonna like get another webcam that is just for Misha, so I can just switch to it. What is my most memorable TERFy interaction in my personal experience? Oh my gosh. So, there's a person that I interact with, and I haven't heard from her in a little bit, but she was a relatively popular TERF, and, has really come a long way. But I think my favorite part was that, like, what actually brought her away from TERFism was us talking about Buddhism. Like, my Buddhist, training was actually way more useful in talking to a person about gender than for me to just talk about gender. Because when we talk about Buddhism, we talk about the impermanence of everything. We talk about identity and how it's formed, right? And so a lot of the things that people see in Buddhism, they agree with, because a lot of people find Buddhism to be very agreeable, and also sort of scientific. And so I have a lot of mileage as a Buddhist, by just being like, hey, can we talk about something else? Can we talk about Buddhism? And like, we don't have to talk about gender stuff. And then at some point in the conversation, it's like, oh, you can see that they get it, right? That they understand identity. And when they understand identity a little better, that they are more willing to understand gender. So those are probably my favorite. I don't think I could talk about the parts that made that specific interaction with that particular TERFy woman fun for me. I actually really like that person. Um, the reason I can't talk about them is because she's sort of well known, and I don't want to out her. So, because I don't want her to get harassed or anything like that, you know? Um, Ramses, you had a closing question for me. Kind of a closing question. How am I feeling right now? How does it feel talking about these topics? I think my fear right now is that I'm going to go back and watch this and realize how much stuff I didn't say. It feels like I never have enough time when I'm writing for people. I can sort of edit myself. I can make sure I'm hitting all the points I want to hit. When I'm here on a live stream, it's a lot more ad hoc. It's a lot more intimidating, right? And like I'm seeing myself on the screen in front of me. I'm seeing my face, right? And I'm dysmorphic and dysphoric. So that's a little distracting. It's a little bit harder to kind of like think on my feet about a lot of things, because also you never want to say something accidentally that might hurt somebody, you know? And I sure hope I haven't done that here tonight, because I hope people know how much I just really love the trans community. As a binary trans woman, sometimes I use language accidentally that can be invalidating to trans men or to non-binary folk. But I never mean to, and I'm really grateful to have a community of people who educate me when I do make mistakes like that. So I'm hoping I didn't do any of those here tonight. I saw I have more things. So I think my greatest fear is about missing something. It's about being incomplete or inarticulate or saying the wrong thing, right? Putting myself front and center like this does make me nervous. I worry very much about my appearance. I worry about abuse. I worry about a lot of things from being out online, but it's something I feel compelled to do. So I'm sort of going to turn this camera off here in a few minutes, and I'm going to go and take, I'm going to relax. I'm going to, have some incense and some tea, probably, or some more coffee. So, I think we're going to go ahead and close here with that, because that felt like a really good question to end on. So, again, my name is Evie Winters. I'm an educator at the Sounds Like Trans Education group on Facebook. I run a website called eviewinters.com where I write about trans issues and topics. Let's see here, what else have I got? So much stuff. I help to run some support groups for authors. I run a group called Transgender Storytelling, which is just all about helping people write good trans characters into their narratives. I run the Discord server. So that's with an amazing team of people. And gosh, that sounded really self-centered there. Everything I do, I have amazing friends and people who are helping me. And I'm so grateful for the network of people I have. And even though I'm using first person singular, they're so important to me. And I could not do the things I do without my partners, without the team of admins that help run the Discord server or the trans education server, without the members of the group, without cisgender people who are willing to ask questions and who are willing to learn. Which brings me to a point. Again, if you found this useful, I have my information down here, and you're welcome to offer some support that way. Also, in our group, if you are in the Sounds Like Trans Education group on Facebook, we have a fundraising thread. which you can find at soundsliketransedu.com/fundraising. It'll take you right there. And that's an excellent way to support the members of the group who are trans and who oftentimes... Oh no, I did forget to say metagender. So, like, yeah, trans and metagender individuals. Thank you, Talia. I'm still, like, getting that into my vocal habits. See? That's what I mean. People correct me. And it's so good to have that in my life. Yeah, so again, like, trans and metagender folks, you can help them out on the Facebook group and the fundraising thread. People post their Venmo, Cash App, or any specific needs they have for clothing. And what else have we got going on? There's so much. Come to the group. Come see us. Come learn with us, is what I'll say. So I'm going to end off on that note. Let me go ahead and see where the thing is. I'm going to end off on that note. I love you all. Thank you for spending time with me. I know this was long. Not as long as most of these. Thank you for spending time with me. Thank you for being here to learn or for to teach. We're here to teach. I like to say this thing when I close posts on Facebook. I'll just say metta. Metta is a Pali word, means loving kindness. And I hope you have that in your life. And that you help spread it. So, metta.